Okay, we ready? We're calling to order the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Commission Board. Today is June 5th, Thursday. We are at City Hall and it's 5 p.m. And we are going to, can I get a motion to approve the today's agenda?
So moved.
Do I get a second?
A second.
Motion carried. Can I get approval or motion, approval of the minutes for April 3rd?
Motion for the approval of minutes?
Second.
Motion approved, which brings us to open forum.
Okay,
And yeah,
seeing none. I will head on to department report here. Thank you, Sherry. So a few updates. We did not meet in May, so I'm going back a little bit here. We had the pleasure of hosting the American Public Works Association for a volunteer service project in early May. With them, we were able to stain 3 of the picnic shelters in City Park as well as the baseball shed. And then they also helped with prepping the garden beds at Pocket Park in the Chamber. So it's pretty awesome that they were able to come for a couple hours and crank out quite a bit of work with us. So we're very appreciative of them selecting us and working with us on those projects. We're continuing to maintain the softball field and baseball field for rec programs and a slew of rentals over the last month and a half. And then with that, we've also replaced the roof on the baseball shed. T-ball and Mustang baseball started here in May. Soccer finished up. And then tennis is coming up next week. And then Safety Town is in July. And Thurlow T-ball starts in about 45 minutes. So rec programs are running strong right now. We do have a new offering that I just posted. We're gonna run a basketball camp for 7 to 9-year-olds end of July into August. So that's a new one. I'm gonna give that a try. We have an interested coach. So that's pretty exciting to be able to offer that. Parks and trails wise, we did start construction on the Gull Lake Trail. That's the 77 section. So that started May 5th. So far it's going fairly well. We are waiting on the rest of the utilities to be relocated. And then most of the work will happen with the retaining walls, and that's going to be probably the largest chunk of time. So once the utilities get handled, we'll be able to start working on the retaining walls and then paving. There's also the 4 communities have worked together on the grant, so the kiosks have been ordered. They'll be coming in soon. The maps are almost done, and so we'll have a system-wide map, mile markers, and kiosks to help support the trail facilities. And then at Between the Lakes Park, the benches have been delivered and assembled. We are working on getting maps produced. They should be finished next week. I have examples of everything down there from the Gull Lake Trail map to Between the Lakes Park map. And then the Parks and Trails rules signs have been finished, so those will get updated here in June as well. So it's been a lot of sign work the last couple of months. But the benches and kiosks and maps should be out at Between the Lakes Park by the end of the month. So that's what we're shooting for on that. And so really, really good things to have out along the trails, safety, especially, and good to have that information for people. So it'll be on the website and then on site as well, coming up in the next few weeks. Any questions before we move on?
so part of the signage, Amber, was that any of the wayward signs for over on the trail over by the Camp Lincoln?
Yeah, so that's the map on the far side there. That one will have 2 kiosks at the trail entrance, like the main trailheads.
You're gonna have some happy people.
And then, yeah, and then we'll have metal signs at every intersection.
Cool.
So yeah, really happy with how that one turned out, and I think people will be very happy to not get turned around out there. Because it's pretty easy to do. And then, yeah, then we have 5 benches out there that'll be going out there. Other questions? Okay, we can move on to the bulk of the meeting here. New business, 6A is the vacant commission seat. So in your packet, you have the application. Bruce and I were fortunate to meet with Dan last week, and Dan is here tonight. And we think he'd be a great fit for the Parks Commission. Him and his family have been here a few years now. And they're pretty involved, pretty excited to see what's coming down the pipeline. And so looking for any questions from the commission? Any comments? Bruce, if you want to say
I'm
something?
just gonna say, I maybe asked Dan to just make a couple comments about his interest in the commission. Just put in the plug, he did a great job on the interview, so.
Come on up to the mic.
Oh, goodness.
Yes.
So I suppose if it is recorded, right, it comes through, you want it to come through
Correct.
the microphone, so I'll keep my comments positive then, right,
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed interviewing with Amber and Bruce. It was sweet. We've been in the community for 2 years now. We live on Poplar between Church and Cullen, and we're just we love the community. We grew up out here. My wife, her parents, they live on Sinasam. They're actually on the Brainerd side of Sinasam, so you have to forgive them for that. But they love this community. My father-in-law's been racing turtles here probably since it started. And so we just really care about Nisswa. Liam is doing T-ball through the Nisswa program. So our prayer is to be long-term residents here, and we just really care about the direction of the city, and happy to just serve too. This would, could be my first time being involved with the city, which I'm kind of excited about. But it's been good to get excited about the community that we're in. So yeah, anything else you want from me, Bruce, Amber?
Well,
Hey, thank
job.
you. Appreciate it.
We
Thanks for
carry
having
on.
us. And thank you for everything that you guys do as well.
Yeah, I would just put in a plug. I mean, Dan, passion for the community, he mentioned also with his family here, obviously, family that's gonna be participating in events in our parks here in Nisswa, so.
Yeah.
And a retired or part-time pastor, is that correct?
Yeah, so I was in full-time pastoral ministry for about a decade, and that season in the Lord's providence came to a close, and now we moved back into the area. I worked at a plant in Brainerd for about 18 months, and now I help lead a nonprofit in Brainerd, and so I've been part of that for about 18 months. Yep. So, and last thing. I did 3 summers of park and rec work too for the city of Brainerd when I was a teenager, and I just say that, like, if I could do that for the rest of my life, I would. Most of it was sports with kids, and I just absolutely love that. We coach our kids now, and it's one of the highlights of my life. So thank you. Okay.
Awesome.
Well, Dan, you sound like a good fit.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we recommend to the council that we have Dan Nichols as a new member of the Park Commission.
Okay, so do I make the motion? I'm new. at
Bruce
this.
just motioned, so we need a second.
I'll
And then
second.
Alyssa seconds.
Perfect.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so then that recommendation will then go to city council at the June 17th meeting. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Do I need to show up at that?
No. You're more than welcome to, but no.
But Paul needs to come in your place. Dan is a good friend of Paul, and we're kind of wondering where Paul is tonight, right?
I don't want to say it publicly. I don't want the whole community knowing.
Awesome. Okay, so new business 6B city park planning. So this is kind of the bulk of our meeting tonight. There was not a whole lot in your packet regarding this, but I did send you some information that has been provided, I guess, over the years, just as a refresher. And so to speak through just what was in the packet, last year, we set a fundraising goal of 600,000. The timeline was to raise that by February 1st of this year, for phase one playground and pickleball improvements. We did not meet that goal. Subsequently, we did not apply for the DNR outdoor rec grant, and we have paused any site planning. So this is kind of our regrouping, is what I'm gonna call it. And so I did put in your packet some questions for consideration. Mayor Carnahan, Councilmember Fraley, and I did meet with the Lions back in May. They do have various grants available to their organization, so I just want to remind everybody of that. We've known of some of them. And so they continue to be a valuable partner and interested as we kind of navigate some of this. And then many of you were also able to meet with Cross Lake, who has a very strong nonprofit called PAL. They do a lot of their fundraising efforts over there, and have had really great success. So we met with them to hear kind of what some of their practices have been, how they work through some of their things, how they organize it. And I did put that packet of information in your supplemental items for review. So I just want to kind of kick it over to you guys. If you have questions or want to talk through some of our meeting with the PAL Foundation, and then ultimately here kind of trying to work out the next steps. Trying to figure out, again, regrouping on what our priorities are. How do we get something moving here? So I'll throwing it over to you guys if you want to first discuss anything of the meetings with PAL or anything. And then we can
I thought
get into our end of it.
the PAL meeting was very informative and I actually gained a lot of energy from it. It kind of brought us back. I love the word regrouping because that's how I felt. And they talked a lot about transparency and a lot about starting small and, doing something well and then moving and taking it on from there so people can see progress and then coming back to it and picking out another project and doing another project and doing that well. And that kind of gains momentum and I love that. So I don't know, pick out a small project. So that was my thoughts, is pick out a small project, one that we already have monies for and funds for. That fit the park or the pickleball court or one of those two areas. That's kind of that's where my thoughts went.
I think, Mayor, that's the approach you want to take, correct?
Well, it's not my choice, right? It's,
Well, but I mean, ultimately, whoever recommends it come to the council. And
yeah,
make
it'll come to the
decision.
council.
I'm just kind of following up after that meeting, you had expressed a desire, you and Mark, to have something started rather than kind of be in limbo.
Tangible.
Yeah, so that's why we're coming here. So many of us, Mayor Carnahan, Mark Fraley and I, we're fortunate enough to meet with the Lions, which started kicking off some of the dialogues, and then so our wheels were spinning, and I want to give you guys the opportunity to vocalize where you're at, what your thoughts are, and then hopefully we can come to consensus and bring something to the council. And so I had similar takeaways as Sherry from the meeting of trying to find something that we can complete, right? I think that's huge. And yeah, just showing that we are invested in this. We as the commission, we as the community, we as the council, with our funds, with our planning, that we are gonna follow through. And so just want to get with you guys to figure out what we think is the top priority that we can successfully achieve here and what that timeline might look like.
So what was the community's top priorities? I know pickleball was third, you know, so what was the first and second priority when we had that meeting back in two
beach.
thousand twenty-two? Well, beach is not happening.
Well, and I'll say the top most used things in the summer were trails and the playground. In the winter, it was the hockey rink. And pickleball is on there because it was the newest, it was the most requested new amenity. And I kind of look at it a little different where we picked phase one to be playground and pickleball. Phase two was the hockey rink. Hockey rink's a much bigger price tag. I think we've kind of talked through a little bit of we're trying to keep that going, right? We're trying to keep that service. So we don't want to lose that service, that amenity,
The parks you're talking about.
the hockey rink.
Okay.
Are there any conversations about Hockey Day Minnesota?
Um,
I don't know if anyone, city council, or if anybody has talked about it, just the opportunity that it could bring to Nisswa if we had a sheet of ice.
there's a council member that has kind of talked about it, not necessarily in Nisswa capacity, but more the hockey day end of it.
They
So
do-
awareness, yes.
Okay, because they do additional games outside of just like the one location.
Yep.
They'll do games all around the community.
Like to have a game here.
That's what I was gonna say. But
we
ice
have
has to be good.
issues.
Yeah, right? Yeah, and lights have
And
to be
there are
working.
issues we have, so,
Yeah,
and if the Wild is aware, the Wild Foundation is aware of the issues, so
yeah,
it's just trying to get them talking.
okay. I'm just wondering if I know in the big plan, it's to redo the rink altogether, but I would like to just, do we talk about fixing it up and making it something that we can continue until you actually do have this big $8 million, $10 million funding, you know? I mean, why not get it to a place where we can actually, it can be used for events like this, you know? It's not, because it would bring a lot of people here.
Somebody was talking about doing some of the infrastructure under the ground, you know, something that, was it the ice or, you know, for,
The chilling,
The
yeah, doing
glycol.
the chilling? I mean, was that be possible with putting that in?
The last time I got it quoted for a repair was in 2021 and it was 10,000 at that time. And we just don't know the condition of the tubing, so that's the other thing. So
I guess-
last I talked about it, it was repairable.
I just wondered with that $100,000, that can be spent for the rink, right?
The
Ice
group,
Foundation?
yeah, Make Nice for the Ice was earmarked for rinks.
And that's, and that Make Nice Foundation is strictly for the ice hockey rink, right?
That's what was intended, yes. Not to say we couldn't go back to them if there's a plan, but if we have repairs at the hockey rink, that would probably be my recommendation, is that it stays there and goes towards that versus putting it elsewhere.
What I got out of the meeting, that you guys had after that, meeting over in Cross Lake was that there's enough dollars in a couple of funds in the city to do the playground. And in my mind, that would be, if we only have a limited amount of funds, that's, to me, is the priority. Because I think that's what I would find most residents that I'm aware of would want, is the playground.
Yeah, so in your packet, I put just 3 different accounts there. The Make Nice for the Ice Fund has about 121,000 in it. That is the one that was earmarked for hockey or outdoor rinks. And then the capital reserve and the park dedication funds could be utilized for putting towards implementing some improvement in the city park. I will say the park reserve is for all of our infrastructure. So my recommendation would not be to completely deplete it, but what amount of it would we feel comfortable?
So, given the fact that the city has some money for that, and in my opinion, and I don't know if this is what you got out of the Lions, but I would suspect that they would be much more willing to put money towards a playground than maybe some of the other infrastructure. No offense, Sherry, but I don't know that they would put money towards the pickleball courts ahead of ahead of the
Ahead of the
play,
park?
ahead of the playground, yeah.
I
So-
agree with that.
So if that's what the park commission wants to do, and if that's what the city council wants to do, they want to get a project going, what money do you have and what can be accomplished the quickest? In my mind, that's it. Now, having said all that, I will go and tell what I've told a number of you, and which mayor's probably heard from me. I want to go big, and the way to go big is to do the sales tax. And what I would tell to the city council, and I know there's some reluctance on taxes, but we got over 100 cities, it's not, probably more than that, but 100 cities in Minnesota that have a sales tax. And the way to do that is to give the citizens a chance to vote. I mean, you guys, 5 city council members can say, we don't want a sales tax. But do you really know that that's what your citizens want when 65 to 70% of it would be paid by non-residents who are using the facilities in the community? So my personal feeling, this would be a longer term thing then, but I'd rather go big. I'd rather do the pickleball and the playground and the ice arena, not just a hockey arena. My wife would tell you, who was a figure skating, it's not just a hockey arena, it's ice arena, so you have figure skaters and.
Well, there's another, in the original plan, there's another proposed rink too, right?
Even in
Skating
that
shape,
sheet
yeah.
of ice, the figure skater would probably rather have that. Anyway, we're getting off the
Okay.
topic. Anyway, that would be my preference, is to go big and get it done. And you could throw in there the remodeling of the community center. You know, instead of using city funds for that, you could throw that in there. I know you guys have been talking about a new fire station. I mean, all of those are things in my mind, having experience with that I would tell you people would probably vote for. And usually these sales tax things pass 60-40, 60-40, or 64, and you're always gonna have 40% against, 55-45, somewhere in that neighborhood. That's what I've seen across the state. So that's fine. But if all we can do is one project and we have the money for that, then my kind of the long-winded dissertation here is I would say I would want the playground.
Well,
Which
the
does
playground
what does
wasn't,
playground cost?
the playground was in the first phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the budget numbers we're using to kind of try and hit that inclusive destination playground was about 700,000. There's a lot of wiggle room. I'll say the bare minimum to replace what we have is probably gonna be 150, maybe 200,000.
So you're right there.
For the whole playground.
Capital reserve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to do, and that would be probably keeping the 2 to 5-year-old playground that's already there and just updating swings, accessories, and the 5 to 12-year-old. So that won't be relocating, it'd just be switching out some of the equipment. So I'd say low end, you're looking at 150 up to 200,000. What we were shooting for to get to that inclusive destination level was about 700,000, and then you can any range in between. So the more money we can fundraise or put towards it, the more options we would have.
And you're saying that that could be done in phases. The playground could be done in phases.
I would look at that as one phase.
Okay, because my brain goes back to small projects, taking small chunks, that's kind of what I got out of that meeting, was take small chunks with money that we have and then building on that.
If you were
Is
gonna
that possible to do?
make
that
it
with the-
smaller, you could like purchase a swing set for 15,000, and then you can purchase like an accessory. The big thing obviously we'd want to have a plan for what area is going to be saved for the 5 to 12-year-old playground, because that's the biggest component. But yes, that's how you can make it smaller.
Is that feasible?
Yes.
I have a comment.
Yes.
So when we went over to.
Come on up.
Okay.
Everybody
When
use
we
your
went
mic.
over to Cross Lake, I think they said their cost to redo their I don't know if anyone saw it. I went over and saw it after. It was around 350,000. And their playground is beautiful. It's fully, a destination with all ages. And some of the things where they were able to save is like, for example, I don't know what that material is called.
Port in place.
What is it called?
So by having wood chips, it would reduce our costs significantly.
By six figure, by like 100 or 200,000.
Poured in place
So the ground-
is
the gro-
about,
the
Yeah.
Flooring.
yeah,
Yeah.
the rubber ground surfacing is about $30 a square foot.
Versus like the wood chips and then, they maintain them. And then the other thing where the other area they were able to save that they talked about when I did the site tour of the playground with them was they assembled and put everything together on their own and that saved them like 80 grand, 70 or 80,000, right? So instead of like getting to this point where it's like, hey, let's just replace this one swing set or whatever it is there a way, right? And you, Amber would know this, I think with more research or whatnot, with guidance from you guys and the council, is there a way to have this beautiful destination playground, but maybe it's not 700,000, maybe it's 400,000, right? I don't know, I'm just saying numbers.
Yeah.
And then to the point of like, hey, I get it. We don't want to deplete the capital reserve, but maybe it's like taking half or some, right? I don't know what the amount is, right? And that would be a recommendation you guys would need to come to council with. And then with the Lions, be able to do some type of matching. Isn't there is the fund that we have with Blade, with BLACF included in that 88?
No, so the Nisswa Enrichment Fund has 36,000 in it. Some of that is earmarked specifically for different elements like
Oh.
pickleball.
Okay,
And then a good chunk of it, Spirits
Yeah.
kicked over 20,000. So there is a fair chunk of it that is open to any of the amenities. But yeah, so like if Nisswa kicked in a third and then we know that playground example, the Lions, for an inclusive playground, they have a grant for 100,000. So that'd be 200,000 if you can get community funds for another one, or you can put that towards the DNR outdoor rec grant. You could hit that 400,000 benchmark. And then obviously beyond that, if there's more funds in fundraising, then that could just open up opportunity for what we can select in the playground.
When do you have to have that DNR grant in?
They're annual in the spring and usually due March 31st. And you have to be pretty shovel ready with your plans, including like your pathways, like your approaches, your
so
acceptable
ready to go
pathways.
in like April of next year or something, April or May?
Yeah, so if you'd find out, if we applied like in 2026, you'd find out in 2026, you're likely doing construction in the 2027 season. You might be able to squeak it out at the end of that fall, but it also depends on production timelines and things like that.
Well, the other thing on that local option sales tax, I think the legislature is still having a moratorium on it though. That's the last I had heard. So it doesn't even matter. We couldn't take it to the voters because they're still having the moratorium. So like I hear what you're saying, right? And we have heard it before. But if they're still doing a moratorium for another couple years, does it make sense to still sit here and say, hey, let's do nothing? Or do we need to try to find a different pathway to, like you said, to show a small win? To me, a small win would be the playground, right? I know it's a higher amount, but
I just, the playground I think is really high priority.
Yeah.
And I do like pickleball and I think pickleball would be a really good benefit and I do like hockey. And I think that, getting the ice rink, that's a really good benefit for the community too. But just getting that park would be, getting that park in.
The playground.
Or the playground, getting that playground in would be huge.
What can you say? I mean, I have two kids that love that playground, so I don't really have an issue with the playground because my kids love to go there. They love to be there. We're there a lot. So like, are there things that we could save? Like the swings for sure, they've had their time. But like even that main structure for the you probably saw it on last Wednesday when the school was done, there were probably 35, 40, 50 kids on that playground having a blast, So like, I do
Love it.
hear it. I think it's great to add more things too, but like, could we add something instead of take away and remove and, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like,
Move it,
Yeah,
or move it?
or
Cause
move it.
even when we first moved here, we had this cool little car and my kids still talk about that. They moved it out of the playground and like, we want to find it. Like, where is this thing? 'Cause it's like the little things where like, sometimes it doesn't have to be the fanciest thing to be fun. You
Yeah,
know?
so for like
Sometimes
example, Cross Lake, all their poles stayed and they switched out
Okay.
their slides.
Okay.
So like you can switch out like,
Red slide could go.
so like, yes, the plastic on those does not last as long as the vertical
Yeah,
poles. Things that like the platform, some of them are losing their rubber coating, wanting to switch things like that out.
yeah,
I don't know how much is still compatible with
Sure.
like offerings now. That's that because it's 28 years old. I don't know how much of it can still be compatible and swapped out.
Yeah.
So that would certainly be something that could be looked at if we want to keep the poles and
Sure.
switch out other things.
Amber, I asked this, I think, at the first commission meeting I was at. What was the reason for the not using the wood chips originally in the original specs?
To provide greater inclusivity.
Chair use.
So typically, I think, you have to have like an accessible pathway and talking with the playground designers, certain number of elements that are ground accessible versus like vertically accessible and trying to find that balance. Wood chips are accessible. So if you have a whole playground, like we do, of wood chips, you're covered, you're fine, from an ADA inclusivity standpoint. So going with wood chips is just fine. The idea was that it's just more accessible with the port in place.
I guess that would be maybe my thought process is why wouldn't we add the accessibility features? And could we leave the features we have right now, but add accessibility features? You know? I don't know. Cause I would love to see the playground be completely, accessible to all.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's just a really basic one. It's just a really basic question. The one that says push. So you're talking about, a win, right, with the park or with the playground. In the plans, the playground gets moved. So if you just pick the playground, can you still stick with the plans? Like if you pick the playground, are you moving it still? Or is it just staying right where it is? How does like this whole getting a win and doing, if it's just a playground, how does that square with like the long term,
Yeah.
if we had the hockey rink? So just a question.
Fantastic question. So again, in your supplemental information, I shared the overlay,
Mhm.
the concept design with the existing. And I think there's a way, if we change the shape of the playground, to leave the warming house where it is. That facility can still operate and support the skating. And then it might just be a reconfiguration of the playground to positioning of pickleball. So I've spent a lot of time on GIS with the measurement tool, seeing where I can fit stuff in. So that would be my thought. If we're gonna redo the playground and it's gonna change shape, that's what I would do. If we're looking at just fixing up parts of the playground, you're not gonna spend money moving it, in my opinion. And so if you're going down that avenue, it stays in its existing container. That's kind of where my mind goes on it. But if you're gonna put in the new infrastructure, put it where you want it for the long-term plan, because we don't want to just end with a playground. Right? We want that victory, and then we want to get the next victory.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of where my mind goes, but anyone else?
Well, I think to me, working with numbers, I'd want to know the commitment from the council as to what they're willing to commit out of city funds, what commitment the Lions are willing to do, what other dollars are available, and whatever number that is, that's what we have to work with, and that's gonna determine how much we can do. I
Mhm.
mean, if we want to move ahead with the playground, And if it's gonna be 400 grand, then we'll have to taper whatever we get to 400 grand. If it's 500 grand, then we can taper it a little bit more to what's 500 grand. But I guess I would agree that if we're going to do something, we need to probably do it in terms of how that fits up for the following plan. So just replacing something within the existing footprint doesn't sound like what originally we had planned on
Correct.
for long term.
Did the Lions indicate areas that they wanted to support?
Not necessarily. They just kind of listed some of the different grant
Okay,
options that they might have that might fit, like, so I knew about the playground one.
okay,
I think they mentioned another veterans accessibility one. But I think there's multiple
yeah.
sources, and then obviously, you know,
I
that's
think-
just like Lions International,
Yeah, okay,
and then there's Lions like
okay.
Nisswa and region, whichever region we're in.
But and Mayor, I know that you had the attorney write a note, but on fundraising, you know, you as city council people can't lead that, and we as commission members can't lead that, but we can certainly be involved in whoever, if there's a outside community member who wants to lead the charge, and that doesn't have to be for the whole piece. That would be like if someone particularly wants to do 50,000 for this piece of equipment and get recognized for it. You'll go parks all over in different communities and see that, where somebody is paid for just a particular piece of equipment. So that could supplement whatever the city does and whatever the Lions do and whatever grants you do. There might be a family or two out there that would say, yes, we're willing to put 20, 30, 40 grand towards this piece of equipment.
So if the Lions are interested in a specific piece that is not the playground, would we change our plans then? So like, let's say the Lions are interested in helping the rink, then would we be okay with that? Or do we have to say, no, then your funds go to the playground because that's what we're putting our stamp on?
I think they help. Phase
Okay, so we have to decide a phase one.
one.
Okay,
And show them, hey, here's where the city would, here's the timeline, here's where we need some additional funding and support, right? Like, we can go with your ask to them.
okay, because I know a lot of them and I know where their hearts are at, so that's kind of why I'm sitting where I'm sitting and saying the things I'm saying.
I think if the takeaway that I got from them is there's the few that were in the room, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yep.
it wasn't
Yep.
the entire body.
Yep.
So the few that came to us to have a discussion, I think they want to see, there's a lot of passion for the hockey rink and maintaining what we have.
Yeah,
And so I think that's kind of the takeaway that I had, is that they want to see that service continue.
Yep.
And I think would be willing to help that continue in the
Yes.
interim.
yes.
That was kind of my takeaway on it. Being that is such a maybe large project to undertake, I think that's kind of where the lens went of like, we can maybe support keeping it going.
And I think it falls within that little chip away where we could show a lot of progress to a lot of people. And I think they'd be really happy if we did do that.
So what I'm kind of hearing is, one, keeping the hockey rink going as best we can, making some necessary
Yeah, improvements.
improvements, repairs, I'll call it repairs,
Yeah,
to keep that operational while prioritizing.
And Amber, that would come from the Make Nice Foundation?
That's where I would start
Okay.
with those funds. And one, all of this is gonna have to now go through its process of getting new quotes and
Yeah.
and finding out, just how far that money can go. And what exactly that looks like. Is it just the lights? Is it lights and refrigeration? Is it a brand new Zamboni?
mhm.
Would-
All the things.
So I'm missing something here because this may have come up in prior conversations. But this McKnight Foundation, that's specifically for the,
121.
does that mean that there has to be a match from the city?
No, so this we call it the Make Nice for the Ice Fund. It was private donations from years and years and years ago.
Oh, I thought you said McKnight.
Oh, no.
Make nice.
Okay, because there is a McKnight Foundation.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's not us.
Yeah, that's what I heard, sorry.
That's
See,
what
they
I
want to
know
adopt
back
us?
then.
There is a McKnight Foundation.
Yes,
but
there is.
they actually have money if you wanted to apply to them.
Yeah.
They operate in Minnesota.
No, make nice for the ice. I think it would be earmarked and I think they would generally support using it to make repairs. Whatever that comes to be, to keep the hockey rink going in the interim. And then subsequently, I'm also hearing pickleball playground would be our first small bite.
Agreed.
And then also keeping in mind the longer term plan, sales tax may or may not come back in some fashion. That could be then pickleball, hockey, community center, you name it, but that's a discussion for another
Okay,
day.
So I would, excuse me, Madam Chair,
Yep,
I'd want
go
to
ahead.
make sure in a consensus here, because I heard what Alyssa was talking about earlier. So are we talking about the playground, but in the sense that it's going to be the footprint that you originally mapped out? Or is it going to be just, we're just gonna do small pieces of equipment? That's what I'm unclear as to what we're supporting here.
Don't you think we need to figure out how much money we have to spend first?
Yeah.
So take all these grants and funds and add them all up together and find out how much money we have before we can decide where that, if we move or we add or.
Well, and the grants aren't a guarantee.
No, well, I'm talking
the-
about what we have already.
Yep, so the guaranteed money that we have is what's listed up there.
Yep,
Everything else is not guaranteed beyond that.
that's excluding the make nice. But the Lions have a couple other, they might have some more money?
They have various grants and then you can always make a request to them for with their gambling funds for a donation.
But I'm kind of with Bruce in the fact that you have to figure out how much money you have first.
Right, and so that's okay, Sherry, that's what I meant, but also what I heard Amber saying earlier, and that's why I'm trying to clarify. If we are going to only be able to do so much,
Right.
but are we still going to want to move the footprint?
I think your point is very valid because if we don't, I mean, because I'm the one who said, let's keep it right where it is, right? But if we don't have pickleball in the future, I think this community is going to be very upset.
Oh, you're gonna have to have pickleball in the future.
So if we leave the park where it is, we kind of go against what the original plan is. And I don't think that's not gonna push us forward, right?
So are you saying that if we keep the playground as it is, there won't be room for the pickleball courts?
Yeah, because the playground moves for the pickleball courts, right?
If you keep the playground exactly where it is, there won't be room for pickleball courts. You have to find it. So what needs to be decided is,
Yeah.
are you just gonna add something to the footprint and move it later? Or
Right.
are
Right.
you going to say, yep, this is what we wanna do. We wanna move it to, it may not be exactly where it says on here. It might be shifted a little bit. So that you can keep the warming house open for the time being. Move it and then there. So I mean, because if you don't move it.
I'm with you. I'm with you now on that part.
So that,
And-
you're not gonna have-
that was my point.
Yeah, and definitely that pickleball thing is huge. You have to have room for pickleball.
Mhm.
So I would decide, you're gonna move it so that you have the pickleballs later, then I would, then.
And you have to move it.
Well, then you have to decide too, is like Amber said, you don't want to deplete the capital reserve nor the park dedication, but maybe half of it. So you know you have that. And then talk with the Lions to say, we're able to come up with this. This is our goal we're setting. Do you think you'd be able to fundraise the rest of that? And then once that's acquired,
Yeah, so if we have that's kind of what my point was, because I can make a motion for you, but I wanted to make sure we had a consensus that we do need to still move the footprint. And then from there, whatever money the city can get through various
Yeah,
means.
thank you for clarifying that. Yes.
So
Yeah.
if that would be our next step here, is we want to make a recommendation to the council. So Madam Chair, I would make. Sorry. Sorry, I always got accused of talking so loud that I didn't have to use the microphone, so. So Madam Chair, I would make a motion as Park Commission that we follow the original footprint design that was laid out in your planning. And that as a Park Commission, we ask the city council as well as other funding sources to the dollar amount that we can get a playground put together. That would be my motion.
And I would second the motion.
Can I ask a question before? Is there enough room without with just reconfiguring, is there even enough room? Without tearing down the warming house?
Yes.
There is.
Um, let me see if I can pull it up here real quick for you guys. So the nice thing with the playground is it's the one thing that can change shape,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, still trying to hit about 10,000 square feet.
Okay.
It changes it a bit more rectangle.
Sure. There's enough square footage in there.
Yes. So again, with all of my playing around on GIS and trying to measure things,
Yeah.
if you're looking, you see the existing playground is in red.
Yep.
And then the proposed was in the blue.
Yep.
So instead of having it going kind of like a north-south
Okay.
rectangle, switch it to kind of an east-west. You're starting to go towards the softball field. And I know one of the concerns we had with the playground design is having the 2 to 5 year old in close proximity behind the backstop of the baseball field. This would give more space between. And so that was my thought, that you're just kind of, instead of going towards the warming house, you're taking that part and you're putting it towards the softball field instead.
Yeah, the only overlap is just this little piece right here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And so you're just bringing it
Yeah. That
more
works.
rectangle
Yeah.
than square, and it's going rectangle east-west, parking lot to softball field.
Yep.
And then from there, the pickleball courts, I mean, I measured a lot of different things. Like putting it over the like where the existing basketball court is, we'd need it 15 feet wider to put it there. And if it was 15 feet wider there, you could put 3 courts.
Okay.
So I was moving around a lot of things. Okay, did that answer the question?
That did. Yeah.
Okay, so Bruce's motion was to follow the original footprint, i.e. moving the playground location and not putting it back in an existing, and then council to help determine the amount of funding available.
Perfect.
Did I summarize that accurately? Okay, Bruce motion,
My second.
and then Sherry second. Any other discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
I
Aye, carried unanimously.
was
Um,
always used to the staff rephrasing my motions to get it correct.
Well, Maggie's the official.
Mark that.
Maggie's the official, but I tried to take some notes too.
Okay.
Okay, so the last thing we have tonight, we do have a hard stop. There's a meeting at 6:30, so this is awesome. In front of you, this was not in your packet, but I did provide you some information that I shared with council regarding the amended scope for the Gull Lake Trail. So if you guys remember, there's the potential to have some extra grant funds available. It's limited in what we can use those grant funds for. And if you remember, the one thing we talked about was maybe doing a bathroom in Nisswa Lake Park, to kind of help support it as a trailhead facility. And so at the May council May council meeting, city council asked me to put together some numbers, put together some research for them, some information. And I just sent this to them on the 3rd. as a check-in before the next council meeting. So I want to give you guys the opportunity to see this information as well. One of the large discussions that happened at the council meeting was regarding it being a flushing toilet. And so that means connecting it into the sewer, adding a well, adding electricity, things like that. And so not really knowing what that price tag was gonna be. This is the preliminary run at some of those numbers. And so you kind of see our best guessing so far on what the trail cost would be to connect in from the tunnel into the park. And then the cost of the bathroom. And so it's broken into two parts of structure, which is what's on here is a precast concrete, like what we put out at Between the Lakes Park. And then the foundation. So we'd have to build the foundation for them to then put the structure on top of. And so you have those preliminary costs there, the different permits that we would need to go through this. And then I did put a comparison. Right now we have porta potties out there. And then we have the vault toilet out at Between the Lakes Park. And then I put in what I think, kind of a cost analysis on what I think the flushing toilet would be. So this has already gone to city council for just questions. What else information do you need before I bring it back? In June, the red picture here is anything in red is not where we can build. So the green part is the buildable area. And then the backside, which is a little pixelated for you, but an idea in yellow is where the trail would be. It would go over the drainage for the tunnel, and so that would have to be looked at, as well as we have to navigate a protected butternut tree. And then the big red line through there is the force main. So wanted to give you guys an update on this, kind of where we're at on that project, and see if you had any questions, thoughts, comments. Wanted you guys the opportunity to see this and get an update on that.
I got a question, Amber. I know Mark had brought up about talking to the DNR about sharing in the cost of the toilet. Is there any discussion on that, do you know?
It did not, did not propose it to him that way. And part of the grant funds, there's a land use requirement, so that we would have to amend our existing agreement with the DNR for 25-year extension, because that's how long we have to maintain the amenities for. And so when I proposed it to the DNR, it was going to be on our land, our bathroom, our maintenance, because that's part of the grant requirements.
And how many dollars again, do you have to, what's the dollar amount, not on here, but what's the dollar amount excess on the grant?
We have over 900,000 in grant funds. The bids came back at 500,000, and then we can also get reimbursed on professional services. And so based off of those preliminary numbers, I think it's almost up to 300,000. I do want to be a little mindful that we don't get too close, just because we are in the current project and I don't know what change orders are going to happen. So best laid plans, it's about 300,000.
But you're saying we could have a two-holer instead of a one-holer?
Potentially. This is a one-holer.
Two-holers are always good.
They are. And looking at unisex. So yeah, you got the price tag of the structure for the two-hole. But the foundation that's priced out is for a single. Any other questions, comments, feedback?
Well, it'd be nice amenity out there to be able to get it.
The other thing is it'd have to be completed on the timeline, which is by June 30th of next year. So there's very specific grant requirements that we're trying to achieve through this as well during current project. So trying to time it all out is a little tricky.
The essence.
Yes. Okay. Any other final discussion and comments? Our next meeting will not be July. It will be August 7th.
Okay.
Well, Mayor, appreciate you coming to the meeting, and also, that was great to set up the, the conversation with Cross Lake, and if you can do that with other communities, that's always good to have, share ideas, for sure. Yeah.
It was nice having you here today too.
Thanks for coming. Meeting. Too.
And then I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
All those in
Great.
favor?
I'm in favor.
Awesome.